Sandy.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to join me.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
So cool. How's it going? Everything
Uh,
good in your world?
it's been challenging, at least, but
It's kind of a loaded question. I'm sorry. I should not
yeah,
have started with that.
yeah,
Well,
we're hanging.
cool.
We're open at the Oakland and at Chartreuse right now. Obviously distanced, and we're just kind of hanging in. We're in kind of a holding pattern, until things get a little bit better. But I think both places are pretty close to breaking even right now. So we're just kind of waiting it out.
Yeah. Well, we'll get back to them. I want to start at the beginning.
Okay.
So I want the origin story. I did a little bit of research, and owning restaurants is sort of a family thing. Your grandparents owned the Stage Deli.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you're kind of like Jewish deli royalty a little ways.
Yeah, I was when I was 11, I started washing dishes at the Stage, basically to try to get my own money for, whatever stuff that I wanted to get that my parents wouldn't get for me. And I was obviously very fortunate. My grandparents, opened and ran the Stage Deli, and my stepmom,
What was the
sorry.
location of the Stage
So
originally?
in Oak Park, but then they moved, I think, in the early 80s, before it was my stepmom's parents. And, my dad married my stepmom in like 87. So it had already moved into their West Bloomfield location, which is like Maple and Orchard Lake, basically,
Okay.
just south of Maple on Orchard Lake Road.
Okay.
So, yeah, when I was like 11, she offered to allow me to wash dishes. And, now I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. I can kind of see what a great sort of favor she did for me, because, there's a kid that age, most likely gets in the way more than adds any kind of value to a kitchen or any kind of position. But they let me come, I think it was probably just a few hours on Saturdays during the time they probably didn't need anybody. But it was something that I just really, really loved right away. And I worked in that dish pit, into my teen years, and then eventually came back into the dining room. But yeah, just like the camaraderie of a restaurant staff, the busyness of the inner workings of a kitchen was something that I absolutely loved from the very beginning.
And so did you have, like, as a kid where you're like, when I grow up, I'm going to open a restaurant?
I don't think so. I think, the narrative where I grew up was like, it kind of looked down on restaurant workers a lot. And so, I was kind of, we had people that were restaurant people in our family, but, it never, I don't know, it didn't really occur to me that was going to be like the end for me until long after that, until I was like probably in my like mid or late 20s.
Okay. So at that point, because I read that you worked at restaurants probably like through college, maybe through high school. I know I did. But to me, it was just, a job where I could make cash at the end of the night. And,
Where did you work?
I worked at, Royal Oak Brewery. I worked at someplace in Ann Arbor. I can't remember, some famous restaurant where everybody went before the games in Ann Arbor when I lived at UM. I can't remember what it's called now. Tom's Oyster Bar, Como's, Hockey Town. So
Awesome.
I did the circuit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a means to an end for me. Like when you were doing it, did you feel like it was a stepping stone for where you wanted to go with it?
Not at all. It was, I mean, I was, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, well into my 20s. And, you know, even further than that, but it was like, there was, you know, it was just an opportunity for me to make money and kind of set my own schedule. You know, I could get time off whenever I needed or wanted to, and the money was always good. And I got to hang out with, you know, cool people all the time. And it was always the job that I wanted to do. But it never, you know, I never realized that's what I wanted to do forever until I was much older. You know, I had a brief period of time in my early 20s. And my wife and I met in working in a restaurant, but we moved to California together. And I went to like a trade school, like a music recording school. So I worked in a recording studio for years and briefly thought that that's what I might end up. But that was sort of like the cross. Like, he lived in California. When we moved back to Detroit, you know, I didn't find a job right away in a recording studio, and there weren't as many of those here as there were in San Francisco where I was. And so, you know, I went back to what I knew and was good at, and just worked in restaurants. And then eventually it kind of hit me that I was like, you know, this is the only thing I have done consistently for a very long time. It's the only thing that I'm, the only profession that I'm really good at right now. And it's the thing, you know, I've always enjoyed it. So it's, you know, it was kind of like, why don't I just do this? So after I made that decision, I asked my manager, the GM that I worked for at the time as a server.
Which was where?
So that would have been McCormick and Schmick's. So, her name is Sharon Bartlett, and she was the GM there. And I kind of, you know, begged her for a few weeks and maybe more than that to let me become a manager, and she did. And that was my first management position, and I really, you know, I kind of embraced it after that, and just continued to, you know, be a dining room manager, beverage manager, and eventually Atlas Global Bistro is now, I think, Lucky.
Yep. I remember Atlas.
Charlotte and Woodward. So that was my GM position. And then manager in several different places. But at that point, I had pretty much realized that that's like what I should be doing, I think.
Okay. So did you feel like you wanted to get into management just because that was kind of the warm up for potentially opening your own restaurant? Like, did you have that kind of thought at the time? Like, I should do this to make sure I know how to run a restaurant?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I had decided at that point that I wanted to own my own restaurant yet. I think it was just kind of like, this is what I want to do. That's the next step. I've been a waiter for my whole life. And I think, you know, time for me to take a step further. And, you know, so when I sort of like committed, you know, to myself that was going to be my profession for, you know, indefinitely, that was just the next logical step. But shortly after becoming a manager at McCormick and Schmick's, I think I knew that I wanted to have, I think, you know, just the naivete of, you know, the like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed new manager guy or whatever, thinking that he can do everything better.
Right.
You know, I was like, I started writing down ideas for how I would do things and things we would do and all that. And then over the course, of course, that, you know, the next several years being a manager, I learned that all those ideas were probably pretty dumb. But I think, you know, most of the whatever good qualities I've acquired over the years have been from working in those positions for a long time. So.
Okay. So then at what moment did you, you know, what was the first place you opened was the Oakland?
Yes, of my own. Yeah. So, my wife and I moved back here from California. And so after McCormick and Schmick's, my wife got this kind of like random job offer. She was an attorney for 10 years. And her first real attorney position was in Philadelphia. So, you know, we moved together there, and I applied at a whole bunch of different places. It was kind of a cool story. There was a restaurant group that I kind of had my heart set on. It was this guy, Steven Starr, owns a bunch of restaurants there, and you know, they're really flashy and shiny and cool, and a lot of those restaurants are amazing. But I really wanted to work for this company, and you know, I had applied at everything that I saw online. I think at that time it was probably Craigslist that I was looking at. So I was in the bathroom of one of Steven Starr's restaurants waiting for my interview, and I got a call, and I was like, you know, the guy was basically like, you know, we're so-and-so restaurant, you know, we're looking for a manager, and if you're interested, and I was like, listen, I'm here for like a day, and I'm going back to Detroit. You know, can you see me? And I hung up with him, and I think like I barely even, like, he mentioned the restaurant that he was at. I didn't even remember applying for it. I had no idea what it was or anything. And as it happens, I went and had this interview and talked to the guy for a really, really long time. And I came back. My wife asked me how it went, and I was like, it's, you know, the place is amazing. It's super, super nice. And the interview went really, really well, but there's no way that I'm going to get this job. It's like way, way, way over my head. I'd be surprised if they would have hired me as a server. But as it turns out, they were super desperate. And, I think both managers had like these big vacations planned. So they just like, and it turned out to be like my favorite restaurant that I've ever worked at, where I learned, you know, considerably more than any other, you know, management job that I had ever had. So anyway, then we moved back from Philly. We moved to Chicago, and we were there really briefly. We were there for maybe about 6 months. But during the time that we were in Chicago, this bar there called the Violet Hour had opened, and we were just really, really obsessed with it. And a lot of the concept from the Oakland comes, you know, was inspired by the Violet Hour and some other bars that the head bartender and part owner of the Violet Hour sort of turned us on to. So, you know, initially when we came back, you know, I had these plans, and I wanted to kind of hire his company, this guy who opened the Violet Hour, to kind of consult and, you know, manage what would be the Oakland. And it didn't work out. Like he wanted, you know, they had opened bars in Nashville and New York and Chicago and all that, and they were just way more than we could afford. But the guy's name is Toby Maloney, and he was super, super generous in just sharing information and support. And, you know, he just kind of like encouraged me to just do it. You know, he's like, I don't know the Detroit area at all. And you do, and you've been in restaurants, you should just do it. So, you know, we did. You know, we were lucky that that concept hadn't existed. I mean, we're just about to turn 10 years old. And at that time, you know, I would explain the concept to people, and they'd have no idea what I was talking about.
Which was like craft cocktails, old-timey kind of.
Yeah, I mean, even back then, like, people didn't even use the word cocktail. It was all like everybody said martinis.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, not having like vodka drinks on the, you know, on the specialty cocktail list, and not having televisions, you know, not having televisions was like unheard of in, you know, in the conversations that I would have. People would just be super confused. And, you know, I'd have people grab me by the shoulders and be like, don't do this. And, you know, like having seen it in other cities, you know, there was just this like magic to places like that, that I was pretty confident would at least resonate with a few people. And it turned out to be, you know, more than that. And, you know, I think people get it once they see it, but it's, you know, I'm not good at explaining things. So,
so what, I mean, so was it just like on a whim? You were like, your wife is your partner on that one. Is that correct? So were you just like, let's do this? Like, let's just like, were you like, let's try to find a space. Let's get money together. Like what was the, you know,
writing a business plan for a restaurant, you know, several years before. And then, you know, once we were familiar with the Violet Hour and talked about doing something like that in Detroit, you know, it originally started by me contacting Toby Maloney and saying like, can you open a bar in Detroit? Because I'm driving to Chicago every weekend. And it's like, I'd much rather drive somewhere closer. And, you know, it was kind of like, you know, he encouraged me. I spent a little bit more time on the business plan, but it wasn't like at the forefront. And, you know, as time went on and the business plan defined, it was probably like a year or two. And we would drive around and look at spaces, and there were a few places that fell through, you know, that we really wanted. And, you know, eventually this place in Ferndale, you know, I think there was one that fell through that we totally had our hearts set on. And we were super, super disappointed when we didn't get it. And I was just like, I'm just going to not do anything, you know, for a while. And I didn't. And several months later, one of the like leasing agents from a property that I'd looked at in Ferndale, it was where the Grasshopper is now. At that time, it was, I think it was Gracie's Underground.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that leasing agent called and was like, hey, liquor licenses in Ferndale are way, way less expensive now. And there's another space that I have that you can look at that, you know, that you might be interested in. And I was like, sure. So I went, I think by myself the first time. It was Nami Sushi is what the Oakland, what became the Oakland. And I was like, this could really work. And then I brought my wife and she was like, let's just do this. And so, you know, we maybe looked at it one more time and talked, you know, negotiated the lease and, you know, signed the papers and stuff. And I still remember vividly right after we signed the lease, we got into the car and my wife Heather was just like super, super excited and, you know, like giddy. And I was like the exact opposite. I was like, I don't know, man.
You're like, maybe we shouldn't have done this.
I was like, Ferndale, I don't know. I feel like Ferndale might be dead. It's like House of Chance closed and Record Time isn't there. Yeah, I don't know, as usual.
little did you know.
Yeah, so, you know, at that point, it's funny now, like, because we're working on these new places and thinking about all the things that I've learned, you know, in between now and then, and you know, it's mind-boggling to me that we were pull that off. You know, everything at the Oakland, you know, we didn't have a contractor, and you know, all the trades people that we got were just like random people. It wasn't like, you know, like I don't.
You're like just calling people out of the phone book and stuff. Like, are you an electrician? Can you?
It was like friends who knew about electricity or like plumbing or whatever.
Okay.
And you know, I was so furious with one of the inspectors, and thinking back to it, I was like, what? It was insane for me to be anything but totally grateful for him to let us go on so much stuff. But you know, it was like we just figured out a way to make it work. And the loan was the other thing too. It was like, you know, I talked to probably 20 different banks, but I was like going into bank branches and being like, can I borrow, you know, a couple $100,000?
Mm-hmm.
everybody was, I got laughed out of the room almost every single time. Um,
Because you have no previous experience. You have they want to know have you run a restaurant before? No. Next.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, as a restaurant manager, it's not that isn't really known as like, it's just not a profession that makes a lot of money. I didn't have very much money saved. Fortunately, I was lucky to have my wife, who was an attorney at the time, so we had a little bit of money put away. But it basically was just one guy in one bank that I randomly went into, who just his name was, he's with PNC now, I think his name was Tom Vandermeer, and he was just like, I think he was probably at the beginning just kind of humoring me and being kind of polite by saying, he kind of like laid out exactly what I would need, what I'd be able to borrow and all that. And so, I got those things together and scraped up a little bit more money, and was fortunate to get a loan. I mean, I'll say, like, we opened the Oakland for a total, like, including the liquor license, all the construction, all the inventory, furniture and fixtures, all that stuff was like 200,000, which was like a miracle. And 100 of it came from the bank, and the other half was basically like split between me and my wife and just relatives that we borrowed small amounts from. And it was like we were super lucky. And then with Chartreuse, we basically, I was like, went straight to the same banker and was like, could we do a restaurant? The Oakland was probably at more than half paid off by then. And then, he did the same thing. We borrowed more money, and, we were able to do it all over again.
Okay, so let's segue into talking about Chartreuse. Like, you're partners with your wife again, and you partnered with your chef,
Yep.
Doug Hewitt, who I think I saw on here, is still on here. How did you meet him? Like, how did you decide that, choosing a business partner is tough, because you kind of don't know, you maybe know their character, but you don't know what it's going to be like to be in business with them. And I've had bad partnerships. So how did you meet him? How did you decide, like, this is it? And what was the concept for the restaurant? How did you start to put that together?
All right. So there's the way the Oakland came about was, Chartreuse came about like through the Oakland.
Okay.
Two regulars that we had. One is Rachel Lutz, Peacock Room, and Freya and Yalma.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a good friend, and she was ready to go. And she was like, there's a space in my building that you just have to come see. It would be, it'd be great for a restaurant. I was like, whatever. I'm busy now. I can't. And I have no intention, at that time, I had no intention of opening a restaurant. But, Rachel is smart, and she's persistent, and she kept on, bothering me about it and saying, just go look, just do it. And a different regular related to her was Victor Green, who works, I think he's still with Wayne State, although I think he may have left there. And he was doing the same thing. He was like, there's a space in Detroit that you have to go see. And
he was talking about the same space?
Right. At some point he oh, that's weird. I think somebody told me about that. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll go see it. And I did. And it was kind of the same deal as Doc's restaurant in Philadelphia, where I was like, this is awesome. And, it was Rodin.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just gorgeous. And, the thing about the Oakland is that, like, there's certainly at that time, we've rebuilt the front so that it's a lot open to the street and there's more daylight and all that. But at that time, the Oakland had like no daylight. Everything was painted really, really, really dark. And the space that we were looking at in the Park Shelton that became Chartreuse is the opposite. It was really, really bright, huge windows, and just all kinds of natural light. So I loved it. And again, I was like, there's no way we can afford this. You know, our rent at the Oakland, we got a really good deal, and we had been there for a few years. And, you know, I basically told the property manager at the time, who's no longer there, I basically was like, listen, this is all we can afford, and we would need, you know, all these terms and all this. And he was like, okay. And I was like, oh shit.
What if he says yes?
Yeah, I just not, that never entered the realm of possibility in my mind. Like I just really didn't think that was going to be the case. So he said yes. And again, we were like, can we even do this? The kitchen's small. And I called my friend James Regato, who was, you know, one of two chefs that I was really close with at the time. And, you know, he's like, yeah, you can do this, and you can put, you know, charcuterie, you can have hanging in, you can see it from the windows. And he's, you know, he's like going through like all the different ideas that, you know, would make it a totally reasonable restaurant. And, you know, I was like, do you know any chefs? And he sent me like a very short list of a few really good people who are awesome chefs, you know, around the city still. But one of them was Doug, and I feel like James may have said, you know, like you and him would work really, really awesome together. I think he kind of like told me that Doug would be my first choice. And, you know, I went to a couple of restaurants and I met with a couple of people. And Doug's, I think I wanted to go to the restaurants that they worked at. I think I called Doug on the phone and talked to him for a while and just kind of told him everything. And then we made a reservation at his restaurant, and he wasn't there. So he had some event that he had to be working or whatever. And I should add that his restaurant was like an hour away. Mm-hmm. And we had these reservations, and I was like considering canceling just because I didn't feel like driving an hour.
And not get to meet him, and knowing that he's not working in the kitchen at that time.
Well, I even knew that he wasn't going to be there until mm-hmm. I mean, this is years ago now, and my memory isn't what it was. But, you know, I just didn't. I was like tired. You know, I had like gotten home and I just didn't feel like it. And I was like, do we really need to do this? And you know, I was like, we should do it. Just. And we got there and we were like 2 courses in. We're like, oh, shit, this is exactly. I was like, this is better than what I had been hoping for. And we got through the whole meal, and by the end of the meal, we were like, you know, the food was amazing, but we were both like, he's not here. Like, this is huge because, you know, if this is what the food is like when he's not here, I don't know if it's that much better when he is or not, but it doesn't matter. Like, you know, they're performing at a really, really high level. And mm-hmm. for in Dexter, you know, where he'd done like this young series with James, but he hadn't spent time. And, you know, he like grew up in Detroit and, you know, moved when he was a kid or whatever, but he had been in the far suburbs in most of his adult life as a chef. So, you know, he came down and met with me and looked at the space, and he brought like 2 to-go bags full of like different ingredients, sauces and jams, and, you know, like homemade charcuterie, all that stuff. And you know, I don't know if that was like just to like show me what his cooking was, because I had already been to his restaurant, but just like that element of like hospitality and like the love of like feeding people really, really resonated with me. And I was like, this is definitely going to work. This is who I want, you know, to be the chef of Chartreuse. And then, you know, we got along really, really well. I think after maybe a year-ish, he was like, you know, I think he was like, we need to talk, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, great. But he was like, listen, man, I don't want to look for another job. Like, I think like I've contributed to the success of this restaurant, and, you know, I would like to be partners, not an employee.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's great, because I don't ever want to look for another chef. You know?
Right.
So, you know, we basically like did like a handshake thing, and, you know, over the course of the few years, you know, between then and now,
Mm-hmm.
we've basically treated it like, you know, we're just 50-50 partners, and, you know, we share the income, and, you know, I think like back to where we kind of like leave, we leave our own respective houses alone. You know, I try not to, you know, have anything to do with the kitchen in terms of decision making. But, you know, I'll always offer, you know, my opinion if I feel like it's valuable or invited, I guess. I think Doug is the same. I think, like, you know, we both have the guest in mind first and foremost, and you know, we both can be really intense, and we've certainly butted over the years. But you know, I think like both of us just want to put out a really, really good product and take care of our people, and you know, I think we're really like-minded in a lot of ways, and I think that for the most part, I think that that helps us, you know, as partners.
So going back to the inception of Chartreuse, so you have the space, you have the loan, you have your chef. So how did the concept come together? Did you already have that? Did you develop it together?
Yeah, so we knew that because the kitchen was so small and is so small, that like it would have to be kind of reliant on local kind of fresh produce and like many deliveries per week versus one delivery, and you put everything in the walk-in, you know. And again, when we had that dinner at Terry's, you know, that's what Doug's cooking is. So we knew that it was going to be like hyper local and very reliant on like produce and vegetables and you know, really high quality ingredients, just because we wanted it to be a good restaurant. The name Chartreuse, it was basically three things. We love drinking Chartreuse. The Chartreuse liqueur is made with 130 different herbs and botanicals that grow like at the monastery in the mountain range where the monastery is and has been for several hundred years. So, you know, these monks go and pick all these flowers and herbs and, you know, vegetables and stuff and use it for Chartreuse. So that was kind of like the time in terms of our like, you know, menu ideology. And then we found out that the original restaurant in the Park Shelton building was Green Room. So we were like,
what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. It was what?
Green Room.
Okay.
And so we basically were like, why did we rule out Chartreuse? And then we were like, did we? And then we were like, maybe we just forgot about it. And so we were like, let's just call it Chartreuse. That's like the perfect name.
That's perfect that it was the Green Room.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I remember seeing a menu from that restaurant in the Park Shelton from like an old newspaper, and it was like, you know, a steak lunch was 10 cents. And stuff like that. So
Nice.
different times for sure.
Yeah, I was really, really, there was like a couple of years, many years ago, that I was like kind of fascinated with the London Chop House and like its history and, you know, the people who used to play there and stuff. And I think I still have an old menu from there. That's the same kind of thing. It's like a quarter for, you know, a filet or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as the like the decor, do you use a designer or did you?
I did, yeah. So my mother was an interior designer for many, many years. So
Mm-hmm.
she had been pretty much all retired by the time we opened the Oakland, but she was instrumental in the design of the Oakland and of Chartreuse. She kind of both places, like, we didn't really do that much quote unquote construction on. So the overall layout of both places kind of stayed the same. But, she just went really, really heavy on the furniture and fixtures and, and that sort of thing. And I think she did a really, really good job with both places. Obviously so Chartreuse is somewhat polarizing. There are some people that are just turned off by all the green.
Mm-hmm.
And they, like, when we painted and there was nothing else in the restaurant, I kind of had a little bit of a panic attack. And she was like, just wait until all the other stuff is in there. And, again, I kind of think she was right. But, she basically was able to not only do a lot of the design work, but, get a lot of the furniture and stuff at, kind of wholesale prices. And I didn't mark anything up. So I was really fortunate to be able to do that. And that's a big reason why we were able to open those, both places for the minimal cost that we did.
I love the concept of bootstrapping. I feel like it means so much more when you really, have to figure out how to just make everything work moment to moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, like, obviously I'm super biased, but I enjoy eating and drinking that I know, like, at the very least, like, people had a lot of input on, like the Las Vegas concepts of, like, Cirque du Soleil behind the bar and all that. Like, I know that there's a place for it, but I don't personally. Or you're going to spend like $15 or $20 million on a build out. Of course, it's going to be really, really good, but I kind of question how much soul is really.
Absolutely. So then at some point, you and Doug decided to start another venture.
Yeah.
In an exciting up and coming area. So tell me about how you decided, well, we're going to open another restaurant and buy a building.
Yeah. So that happened not very long after, we became partners. We had, I don't know, hey, Jamie, I don't know how many lease deals that we had that fell through, but there were a lot. There were some that, we were interested in and seemed like it was going to work, and then it fell through. There were some that we had actual leases that we were negotiating that fell through, and so on. But we never planned on buying a building. I never thought that was, a possibility. And, we came across this one and looked at it again, like, this could be really cool. The Freya and Dragonfly concept, those are the names of the two places that we're opening side by side.
So it's going to be two different it's a restaurant and a bar in one.
So we're treating it like two different places. So the bar, okay. Dragonfly, and that's going to be really casual and fun and, like, bright and vibrant. And on the other side is Freya, which will be a lot more of, like, a special kind of, restaurant with a focus on multi-course dinners, and kind of, we're trying to treat it like sort of like fine dining, but for the 99% instead of just the 1%. So anyway, there were different iterations of these concepts, but this is generally what we wanted to do all along, in each of the different spaces that we had looked at and at the time hoped to. But we looked at this building and, we found out how much it was, and we were like, there's no way we could do that. But I think it was just kind of like one of those things, like, for shits and giggles, I called my buddy Tom, who did the loans for the first two places. And I was like, does this even work? I don't even know how it works to buy a building. I've bought a house before, but that, I presume it's different. Is it? And he, he kind of like laid out how everything worked and what we would need and how, the loan / mortgage works. And it was the same kind of deal. Like we were a little bit tight with spending at Chartreuse for maybe a year, and ended up like negotiating with the seller. And, by some kind of miracle, we were able to close on the building. It was buying that building was really, really challenging in so many different ways. But we were able to do it. I think it took us like maybe over a year.
Oh, I totally get it, because you have to go through, you probably had to get like a survey and an environmental study, and like there's so many things involved when you're buying a commercial building. So
you know more about it than you do, I'm sure. Yeah, but we closed on it, and then construction was like a whole other thing. And we're finally, I think, nearing the completion of construction. We haven't started with the inspection process.
Mm-hmm.
But we're hoping to get started with final inspections and all the different departments probably next month. So who knows how long that'll take, but I expect that we can be open this year when it's still warm out, I think.
That's going to be so exciting. So you and Doug, at some point in Chartreuse's success, were just like, we should open another restaurant. We should open 2 more restaurants in the same building.
I think like with Chartreuse, we're just really limited. Like that was, it's both of our first restaurants as owners, and it is, we're 6 years in at Chartreuse, and you talked about like partnerships and them being challenging, and it's choosing a partner and all that, and it's a kind of a cliche, at least among like industry people, but owning a restaurant is like having a child, and picking a partner is like a spouse or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we've like fallen in love with Chartreuse and what it's become, but the kitchen is ridiculously small. The service is really casual and fun, but for it to make sense, it's it's kind of high paced and laid back, and so there are things that both of us, Doug and I, want to do, just sort of like as a restaurant experience for guests, that we're just not able to do at Chartreuse. I mean, Doug is brilliant at executing Chartreuse, like that level of food with what they have to work with in the kitchen. I mean, there's one oven that's like the size of like a home oven, and that's all that there's been.
Mm-hmm.
So that that we have a fryer obviously and a range, but he has to formulate the menu and the ingredients and all of the preparation for that very, very, very specifically, and so there are a lot of limitations with that. And then the casual nature of the service too. I think that is a plus in most cases, but there are some fun things that I wanted to kind of explore that we don't really have the time or the ability to do in the dining experience that is Chartreuse. So we're really looking forward to to doing that at Freya.
That is so cool. And so that Grand Boulevard. So you're at Grand Boulevard and
Obion.
Okay. So we're neighbors, because I have the building at Grand Boulevard and John R. that I'm developing.
Yeah.
So so that whole area is just really, people are buying buildings and renovating them. Oak and Real just opened up, so it could potentially kind of turn into like a little bit of a restaurant row, I think. There's also, the Kiesling and the coffee shop that just opened. So I think there's a lot of energy going on about, just you know, opportunities to bring people into that area.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and like the North End has always been, you know, a pretty awesome neighborhood, and a lot of our staff, both at Chartreuse and, you know, the few core people that we've talked to about working at Freya and Dragonfly, you know, a lot of those people live right in the North End there. But yeah, I mean, it would be great to have, you know, like, could people just be walking back and forth from Kiesling to Dragonfly, or having dinner at, you know, Freya, Oakland Real, and you know, I'm really, really excited to be a part of the North End and Milwaukee Junction and in that area.
Yeah, unless we forget about like Cooking with Q, and Supino's is right there, and Baobab Fair just opened. So yeah.
Yeah,
Cuisine is right there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of heavy hitters for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you know, who knows when it's going to be, but once there's like theater season and that sort of thing, I think like a lot that'll expose us to a lot of other people, you know, other areas and stuff as well. But you know, I love the idea of, you know, people that live nearby walking to. That's like one of the most fun things about Ferndale and the Oakland, especially when we opened. You know, it was like, I think for our first probably 2 years, more people walked there than drove, and whatever Metro Detroit, that's really unusual, and I would love to see that it'd be the case for Freya and Dragonfly as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm extremely excited to be a part of that area.
Are you planning any outdoor areas there? Is there any room for it?
Yeah, I don't. We're just trying to get open right now, I think.
Like, that's, you know, part 2.
If we can swing it, I think it will. But in terms of like it being part of the opening, that I doubt. You know, just financially, like, we're pretty strapped. You know, I think we counted on a lot more money from the other places. You know, again, we closed on this building in I think it was August of 2019. So none of the COVID stuff was a thing, or, you know, nobody knew anything about that. So you know, we've spent more than we had planned, and we're a little bit more strapped than we had planned. So, you know, if we can do it, we definitely will, but it'll probably take a month or 2 of income, you know, before we can do that.
Is your mom helping with the design again?
Not as much. She's a little bit older, and we you know, because it's a much more involved construction project, we had to get, you know, our architects were a lot more involved in this process, and so they helped with the majority of the design. Some of the you know, she's kind of helping with, and she's giving advice, but she's not as hands-on as she was in the first 2.
And it's a bigger construction project because, like, Chartreuse was a restaurant before, so there's certain things. But what was your building?
Yeah, this is just a big open building. There were a few walls that we took down, but yeah, I mean, we're starting from kind of from scratch. So, you know, there were in, you know, the intricacies of 2 different spaces, and you know, all that, you know, it was just a much bigger project.
And is there just a wall that is divided? Do they have separate entrances? Can you walk between them, or do you have to go outside to go back in?
Yeah, so there's like a firewall that divides the 2 spaces, and it's actually technically it's 2 walls. We have 2 separate entrances, and you can get from one to the other, but it's like through the kitchen in the back way.
Okay, so not for the public.
Not really. I mean, our you know, our handicap entrance will be through the back, so it's not like you know, it's still like polished and part of the front of the house, but it's kind of like a hallway beyond where the bathrooms are for Freya. But most guests won't be using that back door.
So any other plans for anything after this, or just trying to get Freya and Dragonfly under your belt first?
No, I mean, I don't, I have always kind of questioned what I want personally out of, in terms of my career and like how much is enough kind of thing. And if I did anything else, it would be, it would probably, I don't know what realm it would be in, but it would be, it wouldn't be another restaurant, I don't think. Okay. If it was, I don't know. I like the idea of doing like something more related to, community, like feeding communities or, helping, like helping assist businesses or, entrepreneurs or something like that. Mm-hmm. My wife works for Tech Town, and she's a business advisor, and he helps a lot of, a
business incubator sort of.
Yeah. So I'm very inspired by the work that she does. And, at some point, someday, that might be something that I think I might try to do. But, I spent a brief time before COVID last year, working, I guess it was 2 years ago now because of COVID, but we taught, Evan Hansen and I helped teach some high school kids how to work in the front of the house at Warren High School. And that was really enjoyable. So, stuff like that, like when I'm old and like my knees don't work anymore or whatever, that's the kind of thing that I think I would like doing. But no, I don't think I'm going to open another restaurant after the.
I think that I kind of like heard you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation something about like maybe you had a concept of what it would be like opening a restaurant. And so like, what did you think it was like versus what is it actually like?
I had this moment on Saturday and I can't talk about it because it's just gross, but yeah,
we'll have to trust you.
Yeah. I said to someone that people think that owning a restaurant is glamorous, and this is evidence that it's not. But no, I mean, like, some of it's great. I think like the I got to say hi to my son, Julius. I just realized he was on there. Sorry.
Hi, Julius.
The people, I spend most of my free time with my family. But the people who I consider to be my friends are 95% people that I've met either working together or serving, all like the relationships that I've had, all the people that I know in my life, are people that I love because of the Oakland or Chartreuse or maybe places before that. So that part of it is absolutely, I think, the best part of the industry, at least for me. But there's all kinds of other stuff that is just not fun at all. Getting yelled at about a seat or a table that somebody didn't like. This overall stress of working shifts is like, I'm pretty used to it now. I'm I'm pretty old. And so I've like, fortunately I've been through it a lot, but like when you're just completely slammed and the whole restaurant is busy and, the dining room's full, the ticket printers are shooting tickets out and the ice machine goes down, and then, somebody's car gets broken into and the POS system stops working all at once. It's like those kind of things are like, it takes a lot of experience with that many things happening at once to get used to like not having a full-on panic attack from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to build that grit
when that stuff happens, because I don't want to like jinx it or whatever, but you know, those are kind of like fun challenges, but there's other stuff where, like at the Oakland, for example, it's a bar that kind of prides itself on high proof spirits, and you know, our drinks are strong there, and so, you know, people get sick, and a lot of them don't find the toilet. So, you know, that's a very good example. Like,
so as you were saying, glamorous.
right. That's not glamorous. And nor, like, you know, putting those chandeliers when we were doing our build out, you know, I was standing on ladders trying to put together chandeliers that came with like no instructions and whatever, you know, the picture, it was just one picture and a few lines of like ease. And so, you know, that was just the chandeliers alone at the Oakland were blood, sweat, and tears in the most literal sense. Like my shins were bleeding from leading ladder. So, you know, I don't know, like the people who it's a common thing. Like people say, people just assume that they can open a restaurant, run a restaurant, and all that. And I have found very, very few people who have no experience that can just open a restaurant and be good at it. And the only person that I know personally is Evan Hansen. And, you know, he's done I love Selden Standard, and I think it's an amazing restaurant. But, you know, usually it's like something people with a lot of money do because they think it's going to be fun, and then it just turns out to not be fun, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me a little bit about what you have going on. So if anybody out there wants to support the Oakland in Ferndale and Chartreuse in Detroit, and coming soon, Freya and Dragonfly in New Center, Milwaukee Junction, North End.
I gotta start saying those three together. It's like becoming.
Yeah, it kind of is like a combination of all three. So a little bit, yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have a good night, and I'll hope to, you know, check out Freya and Dragonfly pretty soon when you're open.
Thanks, Jan.
All right. Bye.
Take care.